We like to believe that generosity is a matter of character, that some people are simply kind while others are not. That compassion appears spontaneously, driven by moral conviction rather than circumstance. This belief is comforting, but is also somewhat misleading. Behavioral science tells us something far less romantic and far more useful. Human behavior is highly sensitive to design. What we notice, what we ignore, what we repeat, and what we abandon are shaped less by intention than by environment. The systems around us quietly guide our actions, often without our awareness. So today on A for Digest, I want to explore what happens when technology applies this insight to altruism, when generosity itself becomes something that can be nudged, structured, and controversially gamified. The idea of gamifying generosity makes many people uneasy. Games are associated with manipulation, addiction, and superficial rewards. Altruism, by contrast, is supposed to be sincere, voluntary, and selfless. Combining the two feels like contamination, and yet we already live inside gamified systems every day. Social media platforms reward attention. Fitness apps reward consistency. Productivity tools reward completion. None of these systems force behavior outright. They shape it subtly through feedback, visibility, and reinforcement. The question is not whether systems influence behavior. They already do. The question is, towards what end? Behavioral economics has shown repeatedly that small design choices produce outsized effects. Default options matter. Friction matters. Timing matters. Visibility matters. People donate more when giving is easy. They follow through more often when commitments are public. They sustain habits when progress is visible. These are not moral failures. They are human tendencies. Ignoring them does not preserve virtue. It simply leaves behavior to chance. When technology is used thoughtfully, these same mechanisms can lower the barriers to caring. A prompt at the right moment, a reminder framed as contribution rather than obligation, a system that makes generosity the path of least resistance. In these cases, technology does not create kindness, it removes excuses. But this is where the ethical tension emerges. Gamification is powerful precisely because it bypasses deliberation. It works at the level of habit rather than reflection. When applied carelessly, it risks turning altruism into performance rather than practice. Likes replace impact. Badges replace sacrifice. Visibility replaces responsibility. People feel morally affirmed without engaging meaningfully with consequence. This is altruism as theater. The difference between ethical and unethical nudging lies not in the mechanism, but in the intention and outcome. Ethical nudging preserves agency, but unethical nudging exploits it. Ethical systems invite participation. Unethical systems pressure conformity. Ethical design asks, how can we make it easier to care? But unethical design asks, how can we get people to behave as we want? The distinction is subtle and critical. Artificial intelligence intensifies this dilemma. AI can personalize nudges with extraordinary precision. It can predict disengagement, time, interventions perfectly and adapt incentives in real time. Used responsibly, this can support long-term prosocial behavior. Used irresponsibly, it becomes moral manipulation at scale. The same system that reminds someone to donate blood can be repurposed to exploit guilt. The same mechanism that encourages volunteering can be used to shame non-participation. Technology does not distinguish between care and coercion. Humans must. Elite sport offers an unexpected parallel. Coaches do not force motivation. They design environments where motivation emerges. Training cultures that rely on fear produce short-term compliance and long-term collapse. Cultures that emphasize autonomy, meaning, and shared purpose produce sustained commitment. Generosity works in the same way. People do not respond well to moral pressure. They respond to belonging, clarity, and perceived efficacy. If caring feels futile, people disengage. If caring feels manageable, people participate. This is where many tech-for-good initiatives fail. They demand too much, too often, with too little feedback. They rely on guilt rather than empowerment. They frame altruism as sacrifice rather than contribution. Sustainable generosity does not exhaust people, it integrates into identity. Gamifying generosity ethically, therefore, requires restraint. It requires designers to prioritize dignity over metrics. It requires resisting the urge to maximize engagement at the cost of sincerity. It requires building systems that people can leave without punishment. True altruism must always retain the option of refusal. Without that option, generosity becomes compliance. There's also a deeper philosophical risk. When systems constantly prompt us to care, they can crowd out intrinsic motivation. People may begin to associate generosity with reward rather than responsibility. Over time, the moral muscle weakens. The goal of ethical nudging then is not dependency. It is habit formation followed by autonomy. The system should eventually make itself unnecessary. This is why altruism cannot be reduced to dashboards and metrics. Impact is then often slow, uneven, and invisible. Not everything that matters can be quantified. When systems privilege what can be measured, they risk distorting what should be valued. Care becomes selective, attention follows visibility, quiet needs remain unmet. Technology must learn to respect what it cannot optimize. The most effective altruistic systems are often the least conspicuous. Number one, they do not demand applause. Number two, they do not gamify virtue aggressively. Number three, they simply make it easier for people to act in line with values they already hold. They trust humans enough not to manipulate them. In the end, the question is not whether technology should influence behavior. It always will. The real question is whether we are willing to hold designers, institutions, and ourselves accountable for how that influence is used. Gamifying generosity is not inherently wrong. Doing so without humility, transparency, and restraint is. The future of altruism will not be louder, it will be quieter, more embedded, and more respectful of human agency. Less spectacle, more participation. And perhaps that is what genuine care has always required. Not grand gestures, but thoughtful design that makes the good easier to choose. Until next time.